I'd like to begin by saying good morning and welcome. There are times in your life that you become overwhelmed with gratitude, and this morning is one of those times for me. Not to get too sentimental, but I'm very grateful for a lot of things. I'm grateful for the opportunity to be here this morning. Grateful for the leadership's willingness to entrust me to lead the study of the morning, and it's my prayer that what we study will be beneficial. Coleman has been a part of my life for the majority of my life. I was going to say that I've known several of you for most of my life, but I think it would be a better fit to say that a lot of you have known me all of my life. I can't remember the first time that I came to Coleman. It's just been a place that my family has always come. And over the years, I've spent summers here during your weekly meetings, and I'm just grateful to see my daughter sitting on the same pew as Lord Joe's daughter. I'm grateful that the congregation that has always been so welcoming to my family, that my daughters have the opportunity to come and worship alongside you. And it's just one of those overwhelming times. And so I want to say thank you. I thank God for this congregation and for the people here. This morning we're going to study a simple question. But before we get to that, I just want to ask if you've ever known somebody who has to learn things the hard way. You think about some biblical principles about wisdom. And I know my brother in particular, but several people, and at times myself, just seem like you have to learn lessons the hard way. The easy way is to look at the mistakes and the challenges that other people have experienced through some of their decision making and say, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to choose instead to follow this wisdom, and I'm not going to learn those lessons because I learned them the easy way. There's an answer or a question that burns in people's minds. And that question people have pondered since essentially the beginning. We have within us a longing for satisfaction, for fulfillment. And many of us will ask the question, what can I do to fill that hole? To be satisfied, to be fulfilled. And a lot of people will pursue a lot of different avenues in order to try to find that fulfillment. They may turn to a job or a career and really devote a lot of time and energy in order to maybe at some point that job or that career is going to fill that hole and satisfy them. There are others who will spend a lot of time in the pursuit of wisdom or in the pursuit of knowledge. There are those who will use relationships. They think that if I have a good, steady relationship, if I can get married, if I can have kids, that's going to be what brings me fulfillment and satisfaction. There are those who will pursue self-serving lifestyles, and they may explore different avenues such as drugs or sex or alcohol or any type of entertainment, pursuing the end, which to them is that satisfaction, that fulfillment. Now, we could spend a lifetime going through each of these pursuits and trying to see what the conclusion is. But fortunately, God, in His wisdom, has given us the wisdom of another man, a man named Solomon. Because that man did pursue these avenues. And he was able to draw a conclusion at the end of his life of what was really worth his time and energy. Whenever you think about Solomon, he was the son of the great King David. And if you're familiar with the Old Testament narrative, you know that David is the symbol of the great king. He is the standard. Solomon got to see his father be king and raise that nation to a world power. Whenever his father died, he became the king of Israel. And he was the king that was responsible for the building of the great temple. So nearing the end of the Old Testament, as they're coming back from Babylonian captivity, there's a scene where they're laying the foundation for the new temple, to rebuild the new temple. And there are people that are there that are weeping because they recognized that that new temple wasn't going to be anything close to the splendor and majesty of that old temple. Solomon was responsible for the building of that old temple. Whenever he became king over Israel, God gave him an opportunity to ask for anything that he wanted. And what he did is he asked for wisdom. He said, I want the wisdom to be able to lead God's people well. And so he was very wise. God granted him that wisdom. But God also said, not only am I going to make you wise, because you could have asked for anything. You could have asked for all the riches in the world. And so not only will you be wise, but also you'll have great riches. And he was so wealthy. In fact, there's pieces of the narrative that talks about silver being as common as rocks on the side of the road whenever Solomon was king. Very, very wealthy king. He was successful, especially in terms of the world. Anybody would look at him and they would think that he was a very successful man. He was wise, he was rich, he had possessions. He was honored. There were people who would come from all nations to hear his wisdom, to help him solve his problems. And so you would think about a man like this and say, Solomon's got it figured out. Solomon is the epitome of what I want to be. Surely this man is satisfied. Surely this man is fulfilled in all the things that he has and all the things that he's done. And then we read the book of Ecclesiastes. And as we read through that book, you'll see a very significant theme. And that is that he did pursue so many of these avenues that I've mentioned before and more. And he drew a conclusion. And that conclusion is what we're going to find as we go through the scriptures this morning. So let's learn from Solomon. He pursued knowledge to try to fill that gap, to fill that hole in his heart. He said in Ecclesiastes chapter 1, he said, I, the preacher, was king over Israel in Jerusalem. And I set my heart to seek and search out wisdom concerning all that is done under heaven. This burdensome task God has given to the sons of man by which they may be exercised. Solomon said, I want to be wise. We know he wanted to be wise because that's what he asked God to do. And it shows here that he was willing to put in the hard work to develop that knowledge and that experience to be able to accurately apply these ideas and really be wise in leading God's people. That's what he wanted. You know, there are people today who spend a lot of time and energy pursuing knowledge and wisdom. There are people who have degree after degree after degree, and it seems as though they've got an alphabet soup behind their name. You've got people that have devoted their lives to developing that, doing the hard work. You've got people who just always want to seem to be the smartest person in the room, and it seems as though they're never going to be satisfied until they're the smartest person in the room. Solomon was more wise than anybody who had come before him. It tells us that he communed with his heart saying, look, I've attained greatness and have gained more wisdom than all who were before me in Jerusalem. My heart has understood great wisdom and knowledge. And we see that where people are coming to him and having him solve their problems. But I want you to notice that in all the time and energy that he used to pursue knowledge and wisdom, what he learned from that pursuit. He said, I set my heart to know wisdom and to know madness and folly, and I perceive that this also is grasping for the wind. For those of you that are more familiar with the King James Version, that's vexation of spirit rather than grasping at the wind. But for all intents and purposes, they mean the same thing. And if you don't know what it means to grasp at the wind, I want you to picture this. So you're outside and you see the evidence of the wind. You see the wind blowing. You see the leaves going, the grass going. And if you try to reach out and grab that wind and catch it in your hand, what happens whenever you open your hand back up? You're not going to find anything there. And so you can sit there and you can grab and grab and grab, and you can spend a lot of time and a lot of energy, but every time that you open up that hand again, guess what you're going to find? You're not going to catch the wind. And so the idea that Solomon is trying to convey whenever he uses the term grasping for the wind is essentially to say it was a waste of time and energy. Because if I was going to try to catch the wind, it doesn't matter how hard I try, it's going to be a waste of time and energy. And so as he thinks about and reflects about the wisdom that he has developed, that he's become wiser than anybody else in Jerusalem before him, he says, really, it didn't mean anything. It didn't fulfill him. It did not satisfy him the way that he thought that it was going to satisfy him. What he said is, he said, essentially, I wasted my time and my energy. That's the lesson that he learned. We see that he pursued wealth. I mentioned not only was he wise, but he was rich. And he pursued that wealth. Not only did God bless him with wealth directly, but also there were people from all other nations that would come. And as they asked him to solve his problems, they would bring him riches among riches among riches. And listen to what it says there. He said, I acquired male and female servants. I had servants born in my house. Yes, I had greater possessions of herds and flocks than all who were in Jerusalem before me. Very similar phrasing, right, to wisdom. Just like he was wiser than anybody else in Jerusalem that was before him, he was richer than anybody else in Jerusalem that came before him. He said, I gathered for myself silver and gold and the special treasures of kings and provinces. You go through the narrative and you read about the herds and the flocks and the houses and the vineyards and all the silver and gold. And it's just astronomical. We can't even fathom the amount of money that this man had. Now, there are people who spend a lot of time and energy pursuing wealth. They may work really hard. They may have 4 or 5 different businesses, and they think, if I can make that much money, then I'll be set. And things will be great. I won't have to worry anymore. You know, I can remember whenever I was in college. College kids don't generally have a lot of money. And I can remember thinking, man, I can't wait till I get my big boy job. I can't wait till I get the actual paycheck and I'm not just working hourly in a machine shop or umpiring baseball games. And I can remember the first job offer that I got whenever I came out of physical therapy school. And I told Hannah, I don't know what we're going to do with that much money. I've never made this much money before, especially hauling hay. And it wasn't long before all of a sudden that paycheck just disappeared. Every single time, every single week. And so what I was doing is I was looking for the next pay raise that I was going to get. And fortunately, the organization that I was working for gave me a pay increase every single year. And so every year I'd be looking at it and I'm like, man, we finally got that pay raise. And guess what? It disappeared too. And then I got another job and I got paid even more money. And I was like, this is great. We're not going to have to worry. And it happened again. And what I was experiencing is exactly what Solomon learned. He said, he who loves silver will not be satisfied with silver, nor he who loves abundance with increase. He said, this also is vanity. It's a waste. And what he teaches is a very powerful truth that I think a lot of people neglect to understand. There's never going to be enough. It doesn't matter if you're making $50,000 a year, or $80,000 a year, or $150,000 a year, or you have all the treasures of anybody in Jerusalem before you. It's never going to be enough. And if you think that that's what's going to fulfill, if you think that's what's going to satisfy, learn from the man who had it all. He said this is also vanity. It's a waste of time, it's a waste of energy. We see where Solomon pursued different avenues of labor, and there's a lot of different reasons that people work, that they devote themselves to work. Some people work to get possessions. Solomon said, I made my works great. I built myself houses. I planted myself vineyards. I made myself gardens and orchards, and I planted all kinds of fruit trees in them. I made myself water pools from which to water the growing trees in the grove. So he not only just had a bunch of silver and gold laying around, but he started using it to build. And I know that a lot of you guys own farms. You know how expensive farm labor is. And it seems like the more land that you buy, the more equipment that you buy. And that equipment's gotten really expensive. And you just have to keep working in order to buy more and more. And it seems as though there's never enough time in the day, and there's not ever enough money in the bank account to really do with your property what you really want to do with your property. And so some people keep working and they keep doing so that they can get the pickup that they always wanted. They can get the tractor that they always wanted. They can get the house that is the dream house that they wanted to build all through their teens and up. And they work hard in order to provide that for themselves, for their family. Solomon put a lot of time and resources into his farms and his vineyards. He worked really hard so that he could feel fulfilled by the success and accomplishment. He said, "For my heart rejoiced in all my labor, and this was my reward for all of my labor." I can remember whenever I was a teenager hauling hay, and I don't even know if people still haul hay in this area. Used to, you had to haul with square bales. It wasn't get on a tractor and go. And I remember hauling 500, 1,000 bales overnight. And I remember the feeling that I had when you threw that last bale in the barn and you got it snugged up just right, and everything fit just perfectly, and you sit back on the truck and you take a drink of old, cold ice water, and you feel like you accomplished something. I knew that a paycheck was coming. I knew that I could go and get some rest, and it felt good. Solomon says that feeling that you got whenever you finish that job, that it's good. He said that right there, that momentary feeling is your reward for that. And guess what? That momentary feeling only lasts about that long. Because what he says is that I looked on all the works that my hands had done, and all the labor in which I had toiled, and indeed all was vanity. It was a waste of time and energy. Some labor to be seen by others, or to be honored by others. He said, "Again, I saw that for all toil and every skillful work, a man is envied by his neighbor." Let's talk about keeping up with the Joneses for a couple of minutes. We know that concept. Your neighbor gets a new pickup, so you need a new pickup. Your neighbor gets a new tractor, so you need to get a bigger tractor. We always look across the fence and we think, that's what I need, and I need something better, so that they can know that I'm successful. So they know that I'm taking care of business. So that they will come and they'll take a look at my pickup and ooh and ah and talk about, "Man, I wanted leather seats in my pickup, but I just couldn't quite get one. I had leather seats in my pickup." Solomon was the Joneses. He had the resources to have anything that he wanted. And he said there are people who work so that they can be envied by their neighbor, but I want you to notice what he learned. He says this also is vanity. And in the end, it's a waste of time and energy. That's what he learned from all the work that he had done. He goes on to look at all of the works that he had done with his hands, on the labor in which he had toiled, and he said it was a waste of time and a waste of energy. And he goes on to go a bit deeper into this, and he says in verse 18 of chapter 2 that I hated all of my labor in which I toiled under the sun, because I must leave it to the man who will come after me. And who knows whether he'll be wise or a fool, yet he will rule over all my labor in which I toiled, in which I've shown myself wise under the sun. You ever seen that happen? I have. I can remember in Stratford growing up, there was a particular farm. It was just beautiful. Piped fence, the barns were big and great and wonderful, painted metal. And that man meticulously maintained every inch of his property. I mean, it was beautiful. It was like the entire pasture was like one of those professional lawns. He spent a lot of time and energy doing that. But one day that man died. And it only took a few years before all of a sudden these shrubs started growing up in that property. And the grass grew up tall beside that barn. You could only see about half of it. And a few years later, it was essentially just woods and brush. That right there is the principle that Solomon's talking about. He said you can spend a lot of time and a lot of energy meticulously maintaining your property, making sure that every inch of that property is just picturesque. But he grew to hate his work because the realization came to him that one day he was going to die. And he was going to have to leave it to somebody else. And who knows if that person was going to take care of business. And you've probably seen those situations happen where the next person just didn't take care of their business. And what was once beautiful is now a briar patch. And with that realization in mind, he says, it wasn't worth the time and energy. It was just vanity on my part. He goes a step further. And he says that he hated his labor because for what his man all of his labor, and for the striving of his heart with which he had toiled under the sun, for all his days are sorrowful, and his work burdensome. Even the night his heart takes no rest. This also is vanity. So on top of the hatred of the potential end result of somebody unwise coming and taking over his work, he says it created a tremendous amount of burden and sorrow, where I couldn't sleep at night. You ever had that happen? Hannah and I lived in a neighborhood in Oklahoma City that just wasn't the greatest. And I can remember staying awake at night with my heart pounding, my blood pumping, my brain reeling, because I thought somebody was going to break into our house. I could have swore I saw a flashlight outside our window. I didn't sleep that night. It was hard for me to rest because I was afraid somebody was going to come take my stuff that I had worked so hard for. That's the end result that Solomon recognized. It's burdensome. It's sorrowful. How many times have you put a to-do list together for your farm on the weekend, and you get to the end of the weekend, and that list is longer than whenever it started? My dad and I talked about that a lot. You never get it all done. It just doesn't happen. You just keep adding to the list and adding to the list and adding to the list. And it's heavy. It's burdensome. You get irritated because you feel like I can't do anything else. Solomon learned that lesson. He said this also is vanity. And this is why it's a waste of time and energy. And if all the things that Solomon did, all the works that he was able to accomplish, didn't satisfy him, do you think it's going to satisfy us? We see where Solomon pursued a self-serving lifestyle to try to fill that hole. He said, I said to my heart, come now, I'll test you with pleasure, enjoy yourself. But behold, this also is vanity. I said of laughter, it's mad. Of pleasure, what use is it? I searched my heart, how to cheer my body with wine. My heart still guiding me with wisdom, and how to lay hold on folly, till I might see what is good for the children of man to do under heaven during the few days of their life. He says, while I'm here for just a little bit, I'm going to live it up. Maybe that is finally what's going to fulfill me. That's finally what's going to satisfy me. And so he experimented with alcohol. He had entertainers come in. He had male and female singers coming in to entertain him. You know, today we go to all sorts of baseball games and basketball games and football games and concerts. And, you know, Taylor Swift has been big the last few years. I don't know if there's any Taylor Swift fans in here, but her concerts sell out like that. And people spend thousands of dollars to go and enjoy her in concert. Solomon had the resources to offer Taylor Swift enough money for her to cancel that tour and just come perform for him every day. That's the amount of resources that he had. And guess what? He could have had that female singer come in and sing to him, and he would have got tired of it. Because it's never enough. And you can substitute Taylor Swift with any other person that you really like in terms of concerts and those types of things. He could afford it, and it did not satisfy. You know, we can spend a lot of time and a lot of energy trying to make ourselves feel good. But if you think that you're going to get satisfaction from that, you're not. It'll create a good memory, but it's not going to fulfill that need that you have, that deep and profound desire that you have. He said, it's vanity. Indeed, all this was vanity, grasping for the wind. There was no profit under the sun. He pursued relationships. It tells us in 1 Kings chapter 11 that he had 700 wives, princesses, and 300 concubines, and his wives turned away his heart. I want you to think about that for just a second. Do the math. He had over 1,000 women in his life. I can't even imagine the stress that he was under. I haven't heard enough time with just Hannah. No, she's great. She's great. He didn't start off with 1,000 women. That 1,000 women started with one. And where he thought he was going to get the satisfaction and fulfillment, it didn't happen, and so he got number 2. And then he got number 3, and 4, and 5, all the way up to 1,000. And whenever you do the math, if you were going to spend one day with each woman in your life, it'd take him 2.5 years just to get back to the first one. If there's a lesson that we can learn from Solomon, it's that if you try to get fulfillment out of the relationships that you have in your life, it's not going to happen. It's not going to fulfill the profound, deep desire that you're looking for there. Now, a lot of great things can happen in a relationship, but a lot of bad things can happen too. And I'm going to take a rabbit trail for just a second, if you'll allow me. And I'm going to talk about the importance of selecting a good spouse. Because what he said is that those wives, they turned away his heart. And I want you to listen to the words that he says here. He said, I find more bitter than death the woman whose heart is snares and nets, whose hands are fetters. He who pleases God shall escape from her, but the sinner shall be trapped from her. I want you to let those words ring in your mind for just a second. Whenever you hear people talk about selecting a godly spouse, being committed to that godly spouse, there's a reason for that. Because if you make a poor decision in that realm, he says it's like a trap. And he says the end result will be worse than death. There are outliers. There are people who marry ungodly spouses and everything seems to be okay. I'm not going to say it's good. It's okay. But more times than not, what happens is they end up going through a divorce. And you've got turmoil and heartbreak that is compounding, and you taste that bitterness that's worse than death. Listen to a man who had 1,000 women in his life, and it didn't fulfill him. It wasn't just a waste of time and energy. It was dangerous. But we think that our experience is going to be different than Solomon's. We think that if we don't devote enough time and resources into this relationship, that it's going to be better for us. Here's the reality. We can do a lot of really silly things for the relationships that we're in because we want them to like us. I can remember driving hours and hours just to go have a 1-hour dinner with a female. I'm not going to go into all the stories of all the silly things that I did to try to get satisfaction out of relationships. Let's just suffice to say that I learned my lesson the hard way. And it was vanity. It was a waste of time and a waste of energy. Because it didn't fulfill what I was looking for in that situation. And that's the experience of Solomon. As we think about all of the different avenues that he pursued, a lifetime full of trying to find that satisfaction, what did he come up with? I mentioned at the very beginning of this that we were going to try to use some wisdom principles to learn a lesson the easy way, not the hard way. What's the lesson that he learned? Whenever you go through and you read the book of Ecclesiastes, and we've hit some highlights this morning, it seems like a really, really depressing book. In fact, whenever I first put this sermon together several years ago, Hannah and I would listen to Ecclesiastes on replay. Every trip that we were on, we were listening to Ecclesiastes. At one point, Hannah said, "This is really depressing." And I said, "Yeah. If you're looking for fulfillment from things that the world is going to offer you, yes, it is absolutely depressing until you get to chapter 12. Whenever he starts to pull all the lessons that he learned over a lifetime and say, this is what I want you to understand so that you can learn the lesson the easy way and not the hard way like I did." He says at the beginning of chapter 12 in his reflection, he says, "Remember the Creator in the days of your youth. Before the difficult days come, the years draw near when you say, I have no pleasure in them." His point, as he starts out this reflection, he says, whenever you're young, remember God. Pursue God. Serve God. Because the reality of it is, and some of you guys are getting to the age that you're experiencing this, and I'm speaking to the youth in general. Some of you aren't. Adulthood is not fun. It's just not. It is not all that it's chalked up to be. And those days are going to hit, and they're going to hit you hard, and they're going to be hard. And you're going to miss the days where the biggest problem that you had is getting out of bed at 10:30 in the morning and going in and finding some cereal and figuring out what to watch on Netflix. You're going to miss those days. He says, but the reality of it is you're going to go, you're going to get older, the difficult days are going to come, you're going to have the turmoil and the tumult in your life that is hard to deal with, and you're going to reach the end of your life whenever you have pursued all of these other avenues looking for satisfaction, and you're going to say, I didn't get what I wanted out of that. It didn't bring to me what I was looking for. And so he's trying to save you a lot of heartache here, a lot of hard lessons, and say, remember God whenever you're young. But then on the other side, he goes to the full spectrum of life here, and he jumps to the end. And he says, remember your Creator before the silver cord is loosed, or the golden bowl is broken, or the pitcher shattered at the fountain, or the wheel broken at the well. Then the dust will return to the earth as it was, and the spirit will return to God who gave it. Now that's a lot of different phrases. What's he talking about? Those are all pictures that symbolize the end. Death. And he says, just as much as I want you to remember the Creator in the days of your youth, he says, turn to God before it's too late. Because you never know when the silver cord's going to be cut. You never know when the golden bowl is going to be broken. And there are people right here and right now who've experienced that heartache, not knowing when it's just going to happen. And I can tell you, those people that we lost suddenly would tell you, you think you have time, but you don't know. How many teenagers have died in a car accident? How many teenagers just in the last weekend were at a camp and lost their life because of some flooding? How many middle-aged people who thought that they had time to get their life right died of a heart attack? So Solomon says, you don't know when. And you don't know if you've got the time. And that's an unsafe assumption. As he continues in chapter 12, he says that the preacher sought to find acceptable words. What was written was upright, words of truth. The words of the wise are like goads, and the words of scholars are like well-driven nails, given by one shepherd. And further, my son, be admonished by these. Again, I want you to picture, it's like he's teaching his very son. Don't learn these lessons the hard way. Take my wisdom. He says, I have tried really hard to speak words of truth to you. All of these different pursuits that are vanity and grasping at the wind, he says, I've tried to give you words of truth. And he said these words should have an impact. That's what it means whenever he says these words of the wise are like goads. If you're not familiar with what a goad is, a goad was a stick that they would sharpen and put a point on. And if they were trying to get an ox to tow a plow and it wasn't going anywhere, they'd stick that cow or ox with that goad and it'd take off. A goad was meant to rouse somebody to action. So he says, don't just let these words fall on you and you do nothing with them. Have them rouse you to action. Make a change. Don't keep going down on the same path thinking you're going to get fulfillment. Because I've already done that and it didn't work. Let this change you. He says, let the words of the scholars be like well-driven nails. What does he mean by that? Well, I'll tell you, a well-driven nail, if I were to put just a random nail in a random spot over here on this wall and try to hang a picture on it, that nail would pull out of that sheetrock pretty easily and it would just fall to the floor. But a well-driven nail, if I were to go in and find that stud and very precisely put that in place, you're not going to pull that nail down. You can hang whatever it is that you want on there, and it'll do what it's intended to do. So Solomon here says, not only allow these words of truth to rouse you to action, he says, but plant them deep. Let them stay there. Remember, let them serve the purpose that God intended them to. And that's what he says here. He says that these words of wisdom came from that one shepherd. That's how you know it's real wisdom. Now I want you to put a pin in that term one shepherd because we're going to come back to it. But in the next verse, he says, let's hear the conclusion of the whole matter. What have I learned through all these pursuits? Fear God, keep his commandments, for this is man's all. For God will bring every work into judgment, including every secret thing, whether good or bad. He says, what I learned through my life's pursuit, what really matters, what God created me for, was to fear God, to keep his commandments. He says, this is man's all. If this is man's all, if you devote yourself to that, you think you're going to be left with a gaping hole? All is all. It'll fulfill that desire. It'll fulfill that need that you have. And he says, you need to recognize this and you need to make the change because the reality of it is something else that he knew about is the judgment was coming. And all the things that he did in pursuit of that fulfillment, the things that were in open where everyone could see, and the things that he did behind closed doors that he hoped no one would ever know about. God knew. And he would hold them to account for that. And if that's a hard thought to think about, then I want you to consider the wisdom that he's giving you. We're going to come back to that phrasing of the one shepherd. Because if it is man's all to fear God and to keep his commandment, the wisdom that he's giving was given by that one shepherd. And now we're really going to get to the crux of the answer of that question that we asked at the very beginning. What can fulfill my life? Listen to what Jesus said in John chapter 10. Jesus said unto them, verily, verily, I say unto you, I am the door of the sheep. And that all that ever came before me are thieves and robbers, but the sheep did not hear them. I am the door by me. If any man enter in, and shall be saved, and shall go in and out and find pasture. The thief cometh not but for to steal, to kill, and to destroy. I am come that they might have life, they might have it more abundantly. I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd giveth his life for a sheep. I want you to recognize what he's saying here. There's a lot of things that are going to try to take your time and resources. There's a lot of things that are going to try to take your attention. That is a thief. And that thief comes to steal your time, to kill your soul. It's a waste of time and energy. and many before him, and many after him, have wasted their life in pursuit of these things. And Jesus said, I came as the good shepherd, not as the thief, as the good shepherd, to offer you something of substance, something that would offer you that abundant life. He said, I was willing to give myself as the perfect sacrifice so that you could have that abundant life. What does he mean by abundant life? Is it where our job is going to make us feel good and successful? Where it's going to make us rich and wealthy? Is that abundant life a relationship? Is our abundant life an entertainment where we go to all the concerts and all the games and do all the fun things, and what we have at the end of our life is a bunch of pictures and memories, but nothing of substance? That's not what the abundant life that Jesus wanted. That's not why he gave himself. He didn't give himself for you to go to a concert. He gave himself so that you could have your greatest need met. We want to talk about that gaping hole, that missing piece. There's a reason that we have it. Because God placed within us a profound desire for connection. And not just any connection. A connection with the Father. That was severed when we allowed sin to enter our life. And Jesus says, I am the good shepherd. I am guiding what you do with your life. He said that I am giving my life so that you can have your life in me. So that you can be connected back to the Father and have that abundant life that I meant for you, that's not about entertainment or relationships or wealth or anything like that. What it is that he's offering you is a love that is so deep and profound that most of the time we can't even understand it. He's offering us a joy that no matter what else happens, no matter the loss or the trouble that we endure, there is something that anchors us and helps us get through. He's offering us a peace that surpasses all understanding. That when people in the world see the things that you're experiencing and they're saying, how in the world are you getting through? I don't know. It's because they have that peace that Jesus is offering them. It's anchored in that hope. It's not about the good things that could or couldn't happen tomorrow. It's giving us the ability to take a step back and peer into eternity and know that that abundant life is more than just the here and now. That abundant life reaches forward where one day we also will be raised. Our bodies will be changed and fit for eternity. And we can spend an eternity, a perfect eternity, with our Father who loved us so much to give a piece of himself to die on the cross so that we can have a chance at that. So that we can be reunited with the people who we've lost. So we can spend eternity with them worshiping our Father. That's the abundant life that Jesus wants for us. Job said in Job chapter 15, verse 31, let him not trust in futile things, deceiving himself, for futility will be his reward. If you're searching for the thing that's going to bring you fulfillment, it's time to stop searching. Because Jesus has already offered it to you. Now is the time to enjoy the abundant life and start the abundant life that Jesus gave himself for. Jesus is the answer. You want to feel fulfilled? You want to feel satisfied? Quit wasting your time and your energy on futile things and give yourself over to Jesus. Because with him, you truly will find the abundant life. And if there's someone here this morning who wants to give up those things and follow Jesus, And we invite you to come have a seat on the front row as we stand and sing the invitations.
I have decided